Today we're going to take a tour of Bayview, Lakeview, and the Farragut State Park area. While we do this, we're going to try to learn a little bit about the local history of the area. We're also going to focus on efforts to preserve the history, especially in Bayview and at Farragut State Park. And we're going to see some areas where that leaves little to be desired in the Lakeview area. But I invite you to enjoy the ride, and let's learn a little bit about Lakeview, Bayview, and Farragut State Park.
The first inhabitants to occupy Bayview were Salish-speaking tribes from the inland northwest. Later, the community of Ponderay City would be built up one bay over from what was then known as Squaw Bay. In 1887, the Spokane Lime Company took possession of the lime kilns behind me. There were actually 6 lime kilns originally. By 1905, the Washington Brick and Lime Company was producing 75 barrels of lime per day to supply the cement industry and fuel the growth in the cities and towns such as Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Spokane, Washington. These kilns behind me would chemically alter limestone by exposing it to fire. The extract of those kilns produced was crucial to the production of cement. This product was in high demand by the Spokane International Portland Cement Company. Were it not for the efforts of Nancy Rank, a Sandpoint resident and a University of Idaho historian, the remains of things like this would probably be gone. Through her efforts, the Bayview and Lakeview areas became home to the Lake Ponderay Lime and Cement Industry Historic District. In 1907, Daniel Corbin completed his Spokane International Railroad line that ran from Spokane to British Columbia and connected with the Canadian Pacific Railway. The line was a big success, and Corbin announced another venture to be completed in 1911, which was the connecting line to Bayview, Idaho. His plan was to capitalize on the lime business here by shipping product rather than having to wagon load it out to the rail line, running it on a railway straight from Bayview out to Athol and on to Spokane. The line was capitalized with $600,000 in stock raised by Corbin and friends. The private residence behind me was built by the as the Bayview train station at a cost of $7,000 by the Prairie Development Corporation for Corbin. By this time, most limestone was being quarried in Lakeview, which is all the way across the bay where we started our panning on, and it had to be barged several miles across the lake to waiting rail cars in Bayview. So Corbin came up with an interesting idea where he actually put the rail cars on the barges and then just rolled them right on to the rail line when the barges came into Bayview. Investors, including Corbin and others from Spokane, had another way they could profit from the rail line here. They plotted a town and promoted it as a lake getaway that was only an hour by rail from Spokane. And with that, Bayview's existence and growth was assured. All right, we're here at the Lakeview dock. We're about to head up a canyon ahead of me to explore the town of Lakeview and its history. And as you can see back here, if you look way out there about 2 miles is Bayview, which is where all the lime and limestone from this area that was mined ended up. In the late 1890s, Lakeview became the headwaters of a bustling silver mining district and limestone mining area, growing to over 1,000 people with 15 saloons in this area. And you can see here's one of the very few buildings left in Lakeview. This area has almost no original structures left, and there hasn't really been a plan to preserve anything here. So it is important that we, that we study this area and keep things digitally alive. And otherwise this place might just drop into obscurity. Accessible mainly by water, here you can see the Lakeview area where barges used to load. This is the last remains of that area, and behind it there's kind of an old storehouse and even an entrance to a mine. 1942 brought the need for an inland naval training center to protect from the Japanese. Named for Civil War hero Admiral David Farragut, who during the Battle of Mobile Bay, Alabama, uttered the famous phrase, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead," Farragut Naval Station was comprised of 4,050 acres of prime Idaho forest land and waterfront property that was acquired through the U.S. government's use of eminent domain. As a side note, some families would spend years trying to recoup their lost property, exhausting all legal means to no avail. The camp included 6 individual training camps named Hill, Peterson, Scott, Walgren, Ward, and Banyan, all sailors who had been killed in action at Pearl Harbor in our ensuing battles. Farragut also housed a hospital, which is one of the first to hold a psychiatric ward. In fact, it had 2 by the end of the war that treated what would later be called PTSD, or post-traumatic stress syndrome. The brig, located directly behind me, actually housed German POWs that had been captured in either North Africa or Europe during the war. And by all accounts, they were treated rather well here at Farragut. Many of them actually returned after the war to visit it. All in all, nearly 300,000 sailors were trained here at Farragut, in the camps here at Farragut and the waters of Idaho's largest lake, Pend Oreille. By March of 1945, only 3 years after its founding, Farragut was decommissioned. The site first served as a college campus and later became Farragut State Park. The state park is home to thousands of visitors annually and is served as a site for both Girl Scout and Boy Scout national gatherings, or jamborees. Today, the Farragut Ranger Station houses the names of every sailor who passed through the gates of Farragut Naval Training Station, helping keep alive the memories of those who served during World War II. And one other note that I wanted to point out about the construction of Farragut is before the camp could be made operable, there was a huge construction effort necessary out here. They had to basically log all 4,000 acres, had to basically build a city with sewage treatment plants, places where they could store water, etc. And it was visited both by Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Lana Turner, who apparently greatly raised morale. One other thing I wanted to point out about the Farragut State Park is, if you'll come around here, you can see actually this bronze statue that was dedicated in 2006, honoring all 293,000 plus sailors who passed through the gates of Farragut. In 1967, 17,000 Boy Scouts gathered here at Farragut State Park from 105 countries to celebrate the history and the culture and the language of the area, as well as friendship between nations. Those Boy Scouts in 1967 were thinking about the history of Farragut State Park in terms of, World War II and things like that. Today, we can look back, and that gathering in 1967, which was the first World Boy Scout Jamboree, that's now part of the history of this area, and we've got a monument to that. And I just think that's something that we always have to be aware of in history, is that it's constantly being made and something that might seem like an interesting current event today is tomorrow's history.